The Florida Community of Mindfulness is happy to make these talks available to you. If you find this talk to be a benefit, please consider making a donation to support us. You'll find a donation button on the Talks section of our website, floridamindfulness.org. Thank you, and may you be happy and free of suffering.
We have a common vision with Sweetwater Organic Farm, the Sierra Club, Vegan of the Heights, WMNF supporters, lots of people, and then just lots of people who are just really curious and concerned about their health. So it really is wonderful to join together. Our vision, I just wanted to share it here. Florida Community of Mindfulness, we are about 300 members that come together to meditate and really to learn how to live in a way that really supports well-being for ourselves and the world. So we have a vision that is to create a community and eventually a world. It's a very broad vision that we have, where principles of loving kindness, generosity, and selflessness result in global peace, environmental sustainability, and the cessation of suffering for all sentient beings. So we're just really, we're delighted to be able to sponsor an event like this that is so aligned with our values. We really try to live them. All of our meals here at the center are vegetarian and increasingly vegan. And we have a community that's really dedicated to living in that way. We also offer, and I'll just do a 1-minute advertisement, we offer a lot of different programs here, so please take one of our cards when you leave. They're on the left-hand side, and visit our website. Everything from introduction to mindfulness and meditation, emotional healing, meditation, Buddhism, recovery, lots of programs, so everyone is welcome to join us. So I'd like to introduce our panelists for this evening. Fred Epsteiner, who is our founder of the Florida Community of Mindfulness, and our teacher, is going to be leading off the discussion tonight. Fred is also a retired therapist, and he's been a vegetarian and a vegan for over 50 years. And actually, before we came over tonight, we were talking to Fred's 101-year-old mother, Ruth, who lives in Naples, who's also been a vegetarian for many years. And she said, gosh, I wish I could be there with you. So she's really evidence of how healthy that life is. So Fred's going to talk about the broader ethical reasons for moving to a plant-based diet. Followed by Fred will be Isabel Tassi. Isabel is an attorney. She's the founder of Tampa Bay Veg Fest, and she's a member of the animal law section of the Florida Bar. And Isabel was a dear friend of mine from Sierra Club that we started inner-city outings together many, many years ago, and it's just wonderful what she's done to promote veganism and support that in the Tampa Bay area. Isabel's going to talk more specifically about the treatment of animals in the food industry, the effect of animal husbandry and the agriculture that supports animal husbandry on our environment and its effect on our changing climate. And then we're also thrilled to have Dr. Kushik Reddy with us. Dr. Reddy has a long list of credentials that really support, again, well-being with this type of plant-based diet. He is the Director of Interventional Cardiology at the James A. Haley VA Medical Center, co-chair of Veteran Health Administration and Department of Defense Working Group of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and member of the American College of Cardiology's Working Group on Lifestyle and Nutrition. And Dr. Reddy will be talking about the many benefits of a plant-based diet for one's health and well-being and longevity. So please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Good evening. Before I begin my talk, I want to read some names. I'll read them quickly because it's a long list. And I'm wondering if there are any younger people here who may be able to really ferret out what all these various people, historical and present day, have in common. Okay, are you ready? Pythagoras, the Buddha, Plato, St. Francis of Assisi, Leonardo da Vinci, Martin Luther, Sir Isaac Newton, Voltaire, John Wesley, Benjamin Franklin, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Hans Christian Andersen, Charlotte Bronte, Henry David Thoreau, Susan B. Anthony, Leo Tolstoy, Thich Nhat Hanh, Vincent van Gogh, George Bernard Shaw, Henry Ford, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Schweitzer, Albert Einstein, Brigitte Bardot, Cesar Chavez, Bill Clinton, former president, Benjamin Franklin, Coretta Scott King, Rosa Parks, Thomas Alva Edison, Jane Goodall, Steve Jobs, Franz Kafka, Upton Sinclair, Alice Walker, Clara Barton, Alicia Silverstone, Mike Tyson, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Pamela Anderson, Paul McCartney, Ozzy Osbourne, Prince, Natalie Portman, and finally, but most important, Mr. Rogers. Can anybody guess what all these various human beings, present and historical, have in common? They're all vegetarian. So I'm sort of reading that list just so we understand that we are, oftentimes in America, we think we're at the forefront of history, kind of creating it. But I just want to let you know that this tradition of vegetarianism is thousands of years old. So let me just say a bit, because again, I've been a vegetarian for over 50 years, and I think, just briefly, my journey, I think, parallels sort of the development of vegetarianism and veganism. I became a vegetarian purely for health reasons. I was in my 20s, I was traveling in Europe, I met some people, young people, they were vegetarians purely for health. They were into physical fitness. Kind of would talk to me about it. I got sick with dysentery, didn't eat for a couple of weeks, and then I decided to do it. That was in the late 60s, purely for health reasons. And let me just say, I was not somebody who was very sensitive as a child. I wasn't one of these children who never, wanted to eat meat or always a little squeamish. Actually, I grew up in a family with a long tradition of being butchers. So I grew up around meat and, knives and burly men in white coats with blood smattered aprons and sawdust in their shoes and working in the summers on trucks and everything, hauling, meat around. So it certainly was part of very much, very common to me. And I really wasn't squeamish or had any ideas about it at all. I became a vegetarian purely for health reasons. And it wasn't until really a number of years later when I began to be interested in spirituality and Buddhism that the context of my vegetarian took on a broader meaning and purpose for me. And that is when I really began to contemplate sort of having an ethical content to my life. Something in the 20s, when you're in your 20s, you don't really often think about. But when I began to contemplate it, that which had most meaning to me was this concept of ahimsa. Do no harm, no harm. And that was a very powerful principle. Not only the idea of living a life of doing no harm, but also in a more active sense, that's kind of a do not, but in a more active sense, really working to protect and preserve life. And I think that, for me, that really began, toward human beings, a sense of interconnection, interbeing with all human beings and wanting them not to suffer and certainly not to do them harm. But over time, I really began to broaden that out into what in Buddhism is called all sentient beings. And sentient means, those things that are alive, that have senses. And when we enter that world, we realize the animal realm, the entire animal realm, are alive. And they have senses, they feel. They may have a more rudimentary sort of, mind in terms of thoughts and understandings, but in a sentient way, they all want to live, don't they? And when their life is threatened in any way, they run, they get scared, they fight, which shows you that in their own way, they value their life. And that was very meaningful to me, to extend kind of this sense of life beyond just myself or my loved ones and all human beings, but to all life in animals. And that certainly deeply affected my relationship to what I ate. Obviously, the idea that I was eating a living being, especially a living being that did not willingly give up its life, whose life was taken from it in a violent way, certainly began to dawn on me more and more. So I saw this kind of awakening in my own development that again begins sort of with the food I ate or the food I consumed, but really began to have a much broader context, and that it was more that the things that I ate, the things I put in my mouth, the things I chose had this broader interconnection with all life, and had a connection to a value system, which I think was was a very significant change for me. Now, when I became a vegetarian in the 60s and 70s, those of you who are more later to the game may be surprised to find out that it wasn't easy. I mean, basically, if you told somebody you were vegetarian, they basically believed you lived on vegetables. So you often, if they knew you were coming for dinner, you'd get a plate of overcooked vegetables. If you went out to a restaurant, you'd get what was called a vegetarian plate in those days, which was, again, overcooked vegetables, or you might be lucky enough to have pasta primavera. So there was a lot of pasta primavera in those days. Obviously, it's been quite wonderful. Things have changed. And while in those days it was fairly difficult, or you had to be much more creative in your attempts to eat a plant-based diet, in time it has become easier and easier, and there's much more acceptance of it. So I was a vegetarian for many, many decades, and still, ate cheese and dairy. I was not a vegan. Actually, I never even thought about it, to be honest with you. And it wasn't until I saw a documentary a number of years ago that really brought home the suffering, the incredible suffering that's involved with the raising of animals, even if you're just taking their milk, even if you're just taking their eggs, you're not taking their life. Really affected me deeply, because I realized there was harm. Harm was being done in getting that food to me. And that struck me deeply. So actually, but I think the other thing that also happened was, I think as one changes one's diet and one eats kind of further down the chain, I mean, you're getting away from the heavier foods, I found in time that I really sort of lost my taste for heavier foods like cheese and eggs. It sort of happened naturally. And then I was down to finally, up to a couple of years ago, I'm a tea drinker. And I learned to drink tea when I was in India in the 70s, which was milk tea. So that was the last holdout. I always had a little milk that I would put in my tea, and I would always say, well, I can't taste anything, just put anything else, almond milk or. And then finally, a couple of years ago, I was on a retreat for 10 days, and I just took soy milk with me. And so I sort of went cold turkey, went through a detox. And at the end of it, I no longer consume any dairy products at all. And so that's my journey. I mean, I just wanted to share that with you. And as Angie said, I have a 100-year-old mother who was the wife of a meat man. And for those of you who may be contemplating this and think you're too old, she didn't become a vegetarian until she was 80. She's now 101. And she really relates that she thinks a lot of the fact that she's outlived everybody of her generation, pretty much, really to one of the main things is to her elimination of meat from her diet. So let me just say something about empathy and compassion, because I think this ties in. Empathy, I think those two words often get confused for us. We sort of see them as the same, What I've learned is they are, in a certain sense, different. Empathy allows us to establish a connection to another being and to be aware of what they feel, right? What they experience. So that's what empathy is. So certainly to be empathic for the suffering that is undergone by animals in the production of food is certainly a wonderful thing. But in Buddhism, the word for compassion is karuna, which is an active word. It is beyond empathy. It means there is empathy for someone who is suffering, but that is immediately generates desire to alleviate them from their suffering. So it's active, and I think that's very much I think what's going on for us today as we look around our world and we see this incredible intersection. I mean, it's really kind of fascinating to me, who started out as a vegetarian, purely for self reasons, for health reasons, and then broadened it to this more ethical, nonviolent, do no harm, protect all life stance, to see now, and I know Isabel's going to talk about it in a moment, that all of a sudden issues of ecology, issues of environmental degradation, issues of poverty in the third world, issues of climate change, right, are all intersecting with the production of meat on a vast scale in our society, in the world. So I think it's a very interesting time for us, where all these various areas of concern, from the personal to the interpersonal, to the interconnection with all life, and really the survival of our planet, all sort of end up, in one way, having to do with the choices that we make when we go shopping. The choices that we make in terms of what we have in our fridge and our pantry, the choices that we make as we eat. So in a certain sense, kind of in the trajectory of the past 50 years, I would say for those of you who are thinking about vegetarianism or veganism, or have already embraced that lifestyle or somewhat based that lifestyle, I think our time has come. And I think we're at a time in history where it's no longer just a kind of personal choice, which at the end of the day it is, but I really think at this point the consequences of eating or not eating a certain way have ramifications for our whole society. I think there's an evolutionary thing going on. I mean, I think it ties in, and I'm sure Isabel will talk about in terms of animal rights and animal awareness, that we seem to be understanding, again, our interconnection with all life and the sameness of all life. And that just to protect, ourselves, or protect one species or one country or one people, and to ignore the well-being of all life. And here we're not just talking about animal life. The planet is a living thing, right? The planet is a living thing. It's a living organism. And to understand that we are part of that. And so that any harm we do to any part of it harms all of it, and therefore harms me. I think in a certain way that kind of consciousness, I think especially among younger people, is beginning to arise, and I think that's quite wonderful. So I will stop here, and thank you very much for listening, and turn it over to Isabel.
I was asked to speak on the environmental impacts of animal agriculture and also on animal sentience. So I'll just be speaking briefly on those issues. Some of you may be aware that several years ago, I think it was in 2007, that the United Nations... Oh. sorry, that the United Nations came out with a report. It was called Livestock's Long Shadow. I think it was in 2007. It was from the Food and Agriculture Organization with the United Nations. And keep in mind that these were scientists and researchers. These are not animal rights activists such as myself who are passionate about animals and have a bias towards animals. And what this commission decided, or their results from this study were that if you took all of the transportation on the planet combined, think of every car, truck, motorcycle, boat, ship, plane, all transportation on the planet combined creates less pollution on the planet and less harm to the planet than animal agriculture. So I thought that was a really astonishing conclusion from these scientists, but that is what they came up with, because there is an enormous amount of damage done to the environment with animal agriculture, which many people are simply, through no fault of their own, are not aware of, because you go to the store, you purchase a package of meat in a styrofoam and cellophane packet, and we don't understand the wider ramifications of how that actually got there. We don't understand that it takes trillions and trillions of gallons of water to create the animal products that society consumes, because the water is used, number one, to water the crops that the animals eat, and then a smaller amount of water, but still trillions of gallons, is for the animals to drink it directly. So again, when we think that the planet has finite resources, we have finite arable land, meaning land where crops can grow, crops for people or for animals. We have finite potable drinking water or rainwater. It's a very inefficient conversion of our natural resources to use that grain and that land and that water to put it into animal products. And by animals, I mean, cows and pigs and chickens, but I also mean dairy and eggs. It's a very inefficient conversion of those limited resources on the planet. And the other thing that we need to think of, which isn't really on topic with what I'm talking about, but it is important, and I think Fred touched on it, is that we have brothers and sisters throughout the globe who don't get enough to eat. And when we are utilizing all of those resources, all of that grain that is being pumped into the animals, I forget the exact amount. I think I've heard it's 26 pounds of grain for 1 pound of meat. I don't remember the exact number. But basically, if you could feed that directly to human beings, everyone on the planet would have enough to eat, and we wouldn't have people on the other side of the globe who don't have enough to eat. I understand that lack of food is a far more complex issue than just that. There are wars, there's other issues, but that is absolutely part of it. So we have the power to create a more compassionate world with what's on our plate, not just create a cleaner environment, but also to be concerned about our brothers and sisters who don't get just the most basic sustenance that they need throughout the planet. And I wanted to cite some more information that I was able to obtain. It states also that animals emit noxious levels of carbon dioxide, methane gas, and excrement that pollutes the air and waterways. Animals, through their digestive system, excrete these gases, which are then creating the climate change in large part on the planet. I think that's what the United Nations was referencing in part in their report. And again, that's not something that we often think about, but it affects all of us. I mean, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that every summer it gets hotter and hotter here. And I know some older people, including my mother, the heat affects them very adversely. And we're all contributing to that with a meat-centric diet. And so that's also something that we should consider, I think, when we decide what we eat 3 times a day. When what's on your plate can create an environment that's cleaner and can also be a more compassionate decision, not just for the animals, of course, but also for other people who share the planet with us. And I think I already touched on the issue of the methane. and the billions of animals. Looking at some of my notes, it says here, I also got some information from one of the books that I have, that scientists report that every pound of methane is more than 84 times as effective as carbon dioxide in trapping heat in our atmosphere. And the EPA shows that animal agriculture is the single largest source of methane emissions in the United States. Burning fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide, the primary gas responsible for climate change. And then it says producing 1 calorie from animal protein requires 11 times as much fossil fuel input, releasing 11 times as much carbon dioxide as producing 1 calorie from plant protein. So again, there's that interrelationship of the animal husbandry and how it's affecting the planet. And here I wanted to cite, there's a figure of it takes about 1,000 gallons of irrigation water to produce, excuse me, a 1/4 pound of animal protein. And so 1,000 gallons of irrigation water goes back to what I stated earlier about using the water to irrigate the plants that the animals eat. And I know most people, if you eat a 1/4 pound of meat, you don't think about that, but that's really a huge consumption of water, far more than, for example, how frequently you flush your toilet or how much water you spend in the shower, washing your car, washing the clothes. There's a far greater impact simply on what's on your plate. And so it's a hidden factor because, of course, we don't usually think if you have a 1/4 pound of meat, there's 1,000 gallons of water that went into that, or there are 26 pounds of grain that went into that could have fed many, many people rather than one meal for one person. So those are just, I think, important factors that we all need to consider when we decide what kind of food we're choosing to eat. The other thing I wanted to touch on that some people are not aware of is there are certain things called manure lagoons. I don't know if you've heard of that or are familiar with that, but these large numbers of animals, cows, hogs, etc., you have to realize that they produce a huge amount of waste, and that waste has to go somewhere. And so the problem is there are so many animals that are bred into existence to feed the people of this country and elsewhere. And animals are constantly producing this excrement, and there's no place to put all of it. So there are created what are called manure lagoons at these farms, and sometimes there are accidents, and these manure lagoons overflow and go into waterways and rivers and streams. They kill the fish, they pollute the river, and they're harmful to everyone who's in its path. So again, this is something that we all need to think about. And I don't know if you saw a film called Speciesism, which is an excellent movie, but in it they interview people who in North Carolina near hog farms. Another way that they try to get rid of all of this excrement is the farmers basically make it into an aerosol. They spray it onto the fields like water. And so people who live close by are inhaling all this kind of minute particles of manure, and some of them develop cancer from, obviously the manure has pesticides and other products in it, and it's very damaging to human beings. So those are all things that, and the other thing that we need to think about is quite often these farms are in locations with lower income people and people who can't necessarily fight back. I mean, these farms are not built in more affluent communities. And so these individuals are the individuals who are having the health effects of this, the manure that's being dispersed in this aerosolized manner, or in the manure lagoons that are located on these farms. So these are just things I think that we need to think about, the environmental impact of our food. There are many, many excellent reasons to become vegan, in my opinion. Obviously, for me, my big passion is the animals. They suffered enormously, but it's also our health, which I'm sure Dr. Reddy will speak about, and it's also the environment. But I also see it as our brothers and sisters across the globe, many who don't even get enough food to eat, and that is, I think, another part of that equation. I think I've touched on the environmental aspects I wanted to touch on. I think one figure I have here is about, and this was a few years ago, about 14 trillion gallons annually of water for crops grown to feed livestock in the US, and another 1 trillion gallons are used directly for the livestock to drink. So, I mean, just think of 14 trillion gallons to water crops that only go to the animals. That's not water that's going for humans who need to drink water. That's not going for crops that humans are eating. It's going solely for crops that are fed to animals who will then be slaughtered and who will then, that water is used in that manner. So that is definitely something to think about, in my opinion. And I had a figure, I don't have it with me, I think it's in that book, but basically that the water used to water, for example, fruits, berries, vegetables, and orchards is far less than the water that is used to water the crops for the animals. So if we water it directly for the plants that people eat, we're utilizing a lot less water on the planet. I think that pretty much touches most of what I wanted to address regarding the environment. And I was also going to touch on the sentience of animals. The other topic I'm addressing is that animals are sentient beings. There are several books that you can read. Go online. Jonathan Balcom has written Pleasurable Kingdom. Mark Beckhoff, I think, wrote The Emotional Lives of Animals. And I wanted to give a shout out to Amy Hatkoff, who wrote The Inner World of Farm Animals, Their Amazing Social, Emotional, and Intellectual Capacities. And she was actually a speaker at our first annual Veg Fest in 2010. She flew down from New York and spoke. And I wanted to take some information from her book here and present it to you today. Jane Goodall wrote the foreword. And Jane Goodall, one of her quotes is in the book at the beginning. It says, "We have to understand that we are not the only beings on the planet with personalities and minds." And for any of us who've had the opportunity to meet some of these animals, if you haven't had the opportunity to go to a farm animal sanctuary, I would really encourage you to try to do that. Florida has several animal sanctuaries. One that I've gone to is in Ocala. It's called Kindred Spirit Sanctuary. You can meet cows and pigs and chickens and get to know them as actual living individuals and get to see them with their own personalities, their fears, their uniqueness. It's really, I think, a wonderful experience, and I would highly recommend it. I just wanted to touch on animals and some of the information that I read in this book. Pigs. And many of us have heard the statement that pigs are smarter than dogs. They are extremely intelligent and they're able to respond to verbal communications. Piglets living with humans learn their own names quickly and carry out simple voice commands. They're very quick at learning. And a professor, Dr. Stanley Curtis, who studied pig cognition, learned that pigs can be taught to play video games on the computer, which is true. It's in this book. Using their snouts, the pigs were able to move a joystick that directed a cursor to hit targets on a screen. And this is really very, very interesting. The pigs were able to retain what they had learned because I think that the experiment was done at a university in Pennsylvania, and a year later, the researcher brought back 2 of the pigs, a year later, to a university in Maryland. So it was a different location, different state, different university, and put them back on a computer, and the setup of the equipment was a little bit different. And he says they were a little bit rusty at first, but within one 30-minute session, they were performing the task as they had a year earlier. And I just think of myself, I mean, to me, they sound to be on par with me, because if you teach me a video game and I don't do it in a year, I mean, it would take me, I'd be rusty at first and then I'd pick it up again. It's really astonishing when you think of the intelligence of these animals, and we just treat them as units of, as a commodity and as food, but they're very intelligent. And some people have them. I've known people who have them as pets. It's also said here in the book that pigs develop close relationships and bond with one another. And a quote from Bernard Bars, who's the former senior research fellow at the Neurosciences Institute of San Diego, stated, "After more than 7 decades of cumulative discoveries about consciousness, we have not yet found any fundamental differences between humans and mammals." I also wanted to touch on chickens. Chickens bond with their young, they protect them from predators, and they would rather die for their chicks than seek safety in flight. And there was one example in this book where a chicken saw her little chicks outside and there was a hawk overhead, and she could have just been concerned with her safety and run away. Instead, she ran towards her chicks and she covered them with her wings and stayed there to make sure the hawk didn't harm them. So she put her own life at risk to protect her own chicks. Chickens make memories, as all animals do. They can make memories even before they hatch. As embryos, they hear their mother's vocalizations and are then able to identify and understand them when they are born. Like other farm animals, chickens can tell people apart and remember their experiences of them. They have a sense of the future and can demonstrate self-control and the capacity to delay gratification. They mentioned an experiment where chickens were given a choice between receiving a small amount of food immediately or a larger amount of food in the future. They chose the latter. So they chose the greater amount of food, but they had to delay their gratification at this moment, which shows a great degree, I would submit, of intelligence and cognitive ability. Sheep was very interesting. It showed that when sheep were shown photographs of sheep from their flock, their physiological signs of stress were significantly reduced. This experiment involved showing sheep like just an oval shape, which is kind of the shape of a sheep's face, and then they showed them faces of other sheep that were not in their flock, and that did not reduce their physiological stress levels. But when they showed them photographs of sheep within their own flock, it reduced their physiological stress levels. Cows have excellent memories. They can keep at least 50 bovine faces and 10 human faces in mind for several years. Even young calves are able to recognize differences in people. Cows have been shown to understand cause and effect and can learn to press a lever for food when they are hungry and push a button for water when they are thirsty. Cows, like all farm animals, have a strong need for social interaction. They have distinct preferences for cows their own age or with whom they've been raised. Cows have self-awareness, one of the key components of consciousness. And I just wanted, finally, to end with this. There's a little section in this book. It's called Farewell to Debbie, and Debbie was a cow. And it says here, when Debbie, a cow who had been rescued by the Woodstock Farm Animal Sanctuary, fell down ill, the other cows at the sanctuary formed a circle around her and mooed and bellowed until a staff member arrived. Sadly, the vet determined that Debbie's arthritis was crippling and that it would be best to put her to sleep, to put her down. We dug a grave for Debbie, and when she was laying there, all the cows came and gathered around her and just cried and mooed, relays Jenny Brown, the sanctuary's co-founder. They were so distressed, and when we put her in the grave, they went and lay down on it. Then the whole group went off together somewhere on our 400 acres and did not come back for grains for 2 days. I never expected a reaction like this. I had no idea they were so aware of each other and so bonded. And so that's just one example. There are many, many other examples like that of animals really recognizing other animals and being bonded and empathetic and compassionate with other members of their group. And so I think that's also something very important that we need to keep in mind when we make a decision as to whether or not to eat animals or their products. Thank you.
All right. First, I want to thank you, Angie, for inviting me here, and on behalf of your organization, I'm delighted to be here. And I want to thank the audience for taking time on a Friday evening to come to an event like this. So I want to make an open disclosure. I'm a guy who makes a living by blowing up balloons in human coronaries. So my entire empire, if you want to call it, from practice, finances, and academia, is built upon a certain sector of the population being sick. If everybody is healthy, I don't exist. So that's my foundation. That's where I live. That's my palace. So for me to step outside the boundaries of that palace and to sit on this podium, it's pretty improbable, isn't it? So, but I'm here. Why am I here is my story, and I'll share it with you in a minute. But before we go there, I'm going to make it a little bit interactive to answer one question that I get asked invariably every single time, individually, group discussions, professional discussions. I get asked the Stop Dr. Reddy first question. So let's settle that debate first before I go further. So I look around, I see about, close to 60 people. And let's say the average age of us as a group is about 40, right? That's about 2,400 years, human years of experience in this room. Agree? How many of you seen somebody that you know personally in those 2,400 years of combined human years of experience end up in a hospital due to protein deficiency? Anybody? Okay, how many of you seen anybody end up in the hospital due to a fat deficiency in their diet? Fat deficiency. No. Now, third question. For this, I want a show of hands. How many of you know in your personal life or in your professional life, someone that you love, that you care for, ended up in the hospital, currently suffering, or is on a bunch of procedures and pills for high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer? I guess I answered my question, right? Because that's the first question I get asked. Where do you get your protein from? So I think we settled that debate, right? Nobody has seen, so that doesn't exist. We can go into the science, but that in itself is another whole hour of discussion. So my personal story, and if somebody stopped me anywhere 3-4 years ago and said, Kaushik, there's going to be one day in the future where you're not going to eat your mom's chicken curry. I said, you got to be out of your mind. What the heck are you talking about? That would have been my natural answer, but now here I am. I don't eat my mom's chicken curry. And how did I get there? And so on a day like any day, routine day, working at the VA hospital, I work full time for the VA. For all the veterans in the audience, first, thank you. I should have said that first up front. And there's one here. Thank you. And so I'm doing procedures, and never dawned on me by that time, including my training years. I've at least 10, 11 years behind me. Fairly comfortable. I teach at the university, take a lot of pride in my skill set as an operator and as a teacher. And, so I sat down to report about 4 or 5 reports. Men who have had heart catheterizations done by me that day. And I'm compiling those reports. Every single one of those patients had the perfect combination of high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, sleep apnea, literally the scourge of the 21st century disease burden. And I have no idea why I did not ask that question all these years, and I have no idea as to why I asked that question that day. The question was that if we are treating these men with the contemporary state-of-the-art medical therapy, right? If you're a diabetic at the VA, we are a full-time teaching hospital, and everybody's watching them. We are following medical therapy as per guidelines. If I'm doing this, why did they end up on my table, having catheters and pieces of metal shoved into their heart? To me, I had that moment where I felt like I got my entire practice wrong. And it was a sense of almost inefficiency and lack of knowledge. So I dialed my wife, who used to work for the VA clinic up north in Pasco County, and I said, it's an interesting day here today. So what's going on? So I expressed, like, this is my thought process. She said, it's called midlife crisis. Right? So we talked about it for a couple of days, and I said, I really need to, I felt the need to reinvent myself. I truly felt that I got medicine wrong. And this is a guy who took a lot of pride and who won awards as one of the best teachers at USF in cardiology. And so I took a lot of pride in what I do. But guess what? Nobody teaches us nutrition in medical school. But what they do teach us is vitamin deficiencies, which don't exist in the Western world, and how to treat them. That's about it. But there's no evidence-based clinical nutrition and how to communicate with an ordinary person and make it happen. They don't teach us that. And then I found myself as a tiny little pawn in a bigger picture where you have a problem. Guess what I have? I have pills and I have a procedure. Not so at the VA, but in a bigger picture, because we are the only country in the post-industrialized world that practices medicine as an intent of profit. Nowhere in the first world, medicine is practiced as a business. And that's one of the reasons why we chose to work for the VA, where I can do this without having to look at fellow human beings as floating dollar bills. Right? So we see problems, we use pills, and we use procedures mostly as profits as our main motivation. And to undo all of this, I felt the need to reinvent myself. And every direction I looked, all path led to only one focus: nutrition, nutrition, nutrition. But I was totally void of knowledge, except for telling my people, eat healthy, go see a dietitian. That was my practice rehearsed line. Every patient who asked me, Dr. Reddy, I had a heart attack. I said, go eat healthy, go see a dietitian. So I really needed to get into the details of it. And then one Saturday, we woke up and we just turned the TV on, doing our morning chores to get ready for the day. And I'm overhearing this man in a very interesting tone talking about diabetes can be reversed, heart disease can be reversed. I said, whoa, who is this guy? So I basically got glued onto the TV, and that was none other than Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Some of you may know the name, kind of one of those grand old daddies of this movement. He's still active and doing a lot of good work. So that, in a way, completely changed my perspective. And these are books written for not medical people. These are not textbooks of nutrition for a cardiologist. These are books written for non-medical people, ordinary people in the community. And almost all of my knowledge, even till this day, are from books that I read written for regular people. Except I pull up every reference. Sometimes I get on their websites and I send them emails and I say, I disagree with you on this one. And then that's how I got to a lot of these people, and I'm just spreading the word. And I told Joel Fuhrman when I spoke him at his annual symposium recently that I'm one of those guys, if I'm able to see farther and I'm able to push this message farther, because I'm standing on your shoulders. So chronic diseases, if you really look at across the world, the number one cause for the last 8 to 9 years, the number one cause for disease, disability, morbidity, and mortality is dietary risk across the world. Even if you look at the quote-unquote third world, infections are no longer the cause of death. It's the dietary risk. There are more people dying on the planet as of 2014 from overeating than undereating. So something has to change. So for the past 10 years, American Heart Association publishes a statistic, annual statistics. They interview about 4,000 people, so they have a good sample, very reflective of a pie of the American sample size. They ask them a bunch of questions. And what they conclude every year, including the data for 2017, only 10% of us are smokers. But that took us 130 years of relentless campaign to say to ourselves, only 10% of us smoke. Hospitals used to sell cigarettes. American Medical Association at one point in time had an official document stating smoking in moderation is good for you. Right? But now it took us, see, the way we look at smoking, right, as a society, just imagine a scene when we go by Publix. Just imagine a scene of a mother handing a cigarette to a 10-year-old boy. That used to happen. But how do we feel about it now? And if you don't remember anything, I want you to remember from this meeting, in about 20 to 30 years from now, they're going to look at us and ask us the same question. How did you take your children to McDonald's? How did you feed your children a group 1 carcinogen? Because the data was already there. As of 2015, the World Health Organization officially declared all processed meats as group 1 carcinogen. They put bacon in the same table as plutonium. Think about it. So that's the paradigm shift I'm working towards to inform people to get there. Are we to wait another 130 years before we say processed meats are actually bad for us? Right? So that's my journey, is that I got into, learn the clinical science of nutrition. And the bigger part is that how do you communicate with this person? Because if I sit across, the table with a 65-year-old Vietnam veteran who are, amazing heroes, but they're kind of stuck in their stubborn ways of doing things, okay? And to convince that man to give up. And I'll share a real thought experiment I do, so that way you can really understand what I'm talking about. So I go to see patients in the cardiac cath preparatory room. So that's where we take patients, meet them, put them in a gown. They're getting ready to go on the table for the procedure. So I go with my team, and I have my team, one of my junior students, start timing me, start a timer. I never met this person. This person was seen by one of my cardiology partners who sends the patient for a heart cath. So I'm meeting them for the first time. I shake my hands, I introduce myself, but before I go there, I tell my team, you're going to time me that I'm going to have this man that I never met, complete stranger, not my patient. I'm going to have him sign on a dotted line consenting to undergo a procedure performed by me, who we never met, where the risk of death, stroke, and heart attack are included in the consent. I'm going to have him do that under 5 minutes. Right? So we do that, and the patient signs the consent, and then I go see a couple of patients, and I come back. And I come back and I said, hey, Mr. Smith, by the way, I took some time and I spent some time with your chart, and I'm looking at your medications and I'm looking at your overall risk. I think there are a few things that we can do here today that we can avoid, we can hold off on the procedure. Oh, really, doc? What are those things? I said, tell me what you eat. Breakfast. Bacon, sausage, and eggs. I said the bacon got to go. And then my student is retiming me again, right? This is round 2. And the barrage of questions from the family members. And what do you mean the bacon got to go? I said, what do you mean that eggs are bad for me? So I intentionally let this exercise, a human interaction, go on for sometimes half an hour. That's when I tell them, remember the first Dr. Reddy who came by you? Who was going to put you through an invasive procedure? That came with the risk, and he showed you the numbers. That came with the risk of you potentially dying today because of a complication that could cause. Rare, but it can happen. You signed off without asking a single question. The same guy came back. He's trying to put your life, your health in your hands, in your wife's hands, in your daughter's hands, in your partner's hands, in your kitchen, in your pantry, and you're challenging him. Let's think about it. And some of these men, these are combat veterans. They hear that and they start crying because they're not used to it. And I'm not used to it. At the end of some of these conversations, I actually feel emotionally drained. Because what I'm used to, look at the computer, type notes, take pills, come back for a procedure. That's what I'm used to. That's what I'm trained at. But to look in the eye of someone who is suffering, who is hurting, who has a disease problem that they're being told that they're going to deal with it for the rest of their lives. To look them, it's easy to say, hey, stop eating this and go away. It's very difficult to bring about a behavioral change. And it's not easy, but it can be done. But to be able to do that, I'm going to ask all of you the same question that I ask my patient. What do you want your health for? Find that reason. What is your reason? Why do you want to be healthy? And let's meet there. I'm willing to meet you where you are at. Because if I expect everybody to meet me where I am at, it's just not going to happen. Yeah, because from a purist sense and point of view, there's always the ongoing debate between a purist and a pragmatist. Yeah, but the standard American diet has to go. Whether we meet as all vegans or not, that's another. It's a process. It's a process that I would like to make fun for everybody. I don't want to make the process some kind of a punishment imposed by your doctor. Do it my way, vegan, or don't come to my clinic. That's not what I say to people. Yeah, but because for example, if I were to stand here and talk about interventional cardiology, how to do a procedure, I'm the director of interventional cardiology. I'm the expert. Nobody's going to oppose me unless all of you are interventional cardiologists, right? But guess what? All of us eat. So everybody is an expert, right? So those emotions are deep, those opinions are deep because they're rooted in culture, they're rooted in generations of habits, they're rooted in our national spirits as to what we do on July 4th. Asking people not to barbecue on July 4th, easier said than done, right? So all these barriers need to be overcome. But to be able to do that, each one of us have to start with that fundamental question. Why do I want to be healthy? What is my reason? Right? Kind of a crazy question to ask. Some people, I actually literally make my patients answer that question. What is your reason? Why do you want to be healthy? And what would you do with that health? And I literally draw pictures and I tell them, these are the ways my goal as your care provider is to keep you as far away from me as possible. Right? So John Mackey, who is the founder of Whole Foods, a few weeks after he sold Whole Foods to Amazon for $6 billion, was one of the keynote speakers at American College of Lifestyle Medicine last year. So my wife and I attended that for the first time. So I'm in the audience, appropriately so, during his amazing lecture. John, I don't know how to put it, but he badmouthed interventional cardiologists. So, which is true, for the most part is true. Majority of these procedures are not necessary. 75% of interventions are not needed. See, I have the dual honor of at the VA hospital as the guy who does the highest risk procedures that nobody wants to do. Also, the guy who cancels the highest number of procedures. Right? So I went up to the podium, I went up to the floor with a mic like this, and I challenged John Mackey, hey, look, there are the culprits within the community of interventional cardiology, but there are the likes of me who are just learning the ropes of interventional cardiology and telling the world that I have a carrot and a stent. You pick. It is true. It is true, and the way I do this is don't make it about weight loss, because especially I really never bring this issue and talk about weight loss, because since when life has become a contest about fitting in a thinner casket, right? Yeah. So we're not in a competition to fit in a thinner casket. Right? So, but a lot of people make it about, weight loss, but culturally, we have made a taboo out of it in this country, right? It's a stigma, it's the pressure, it's the image. Whose diet are you following? Who are you competing with? The Biggest Loser shows, and it's a mess. Instead, let's make it about health. And the weight loss will come as a bonus. That's I joke about. That's the only side effect that you're going to have, that you're going to lose weight. I tell my patients, don't even go on the scale. Don't even go on the scale. Empower yourself. Read some material. Go on the internet. Look up some videos. Get out of the mercy of being a part of the system. Don't be at the mercy of the system. Because being a part of the mercy of the system got you where? Sleep apnea, AFib, a bunch of heart catheterizations, and 17 pills. And the same thing is going to happen if you be at the mercy of the system for weight loss. Right? I'm not going to expect all of you to come back with an MD, PhD, and a cardiology diploma next to you in 3 months. Just read one book and try it for a few weeks, and then you'll be the judge. And that's where health works. And the rewards and the feedbacks that I get are just unbelievable. Just 2 weeks ago, I had a CCU intensive care nurse walked up to me. I was rounding on a weekend. He comes up to me and he goes, Dr. Reddy, I just want to thank you because I heard you speak to a lot of patients, and one day it hit me, maybe I should do this. I looked at him, you look lean, what was your reason? What was your reason to change your eating habits? He goes, my total cholesterol was 263. And he's a nurse in the coronary care unit. And he tells me within 3 months of going completely plant-based, his cholesterol fell down 61 points. And I joked with them, so you're a nurse in the CCU. You see on a daily basis men and women suffer as consequences of heart disease. And you know the relation between cholesterol and heart disease. It never dawned on you before you took a pill. How about stop eating cholesterol in the first place and see what happens? What a novel idea, right? So that brings us to an extremely important point. There's a huge confusion within the society going on right now for the past couple of years. Dietary cholesterol has no relation with your heart attacks. How many of you heard this discussion? Right? This is how it came about. If you look at the cholesterol numbers in America, we average around 200 to 210. That's our average. That's why all the guidelines tell us normal cholesterol should be around 200. No mammal leaves us there. No other non-American human meets us there. Nobody meets us there at 210. But that's what we define as normal, right? So if you take a room full of people with a total cholesterol of 200, and you conduct an experiment on them, you feed them extra 4 eggs for the next 2 weeks, right? Their cholesterol is going to go up a little bit because they're already 50 to 60 points higher than where they should be. Their entire bloodstream is fully saturated. But in those studies where people in the media tell you that bacon is back, butter is back, eat all of it because there's no data supporting high cholesterol is bad for you. But you took 200 people, you never took a guy like me and exposed me to extra 4 eggs a day and tested what my cholesterol goes up to. The analogy I draw is that you walk in front of a house on fire, you threw a matchstick at it, and you concluded that the temperature did not change. That's what we just did. That's where the data comes from. And it's linear. We can draw mathematical equations and show people what happens to blood cholesterol when you eat X amount of cholesterol. So that's where I am so I am learning as I teach, and this is from my wife, myself, and my family, and many physicians alike. This is a newfound passion that we're just sharing. I don't have a fad plan to sell you guys. I don't have a program. I just have 2 things: is science and the way the Mother Nature evolved, and what to eat. We can completely, the man telling a 100-year-old mother living without any animal products. And the longest living societies anywhere, any culture in the history of recent human evolution, the people who live the longest and the healthiest lives are people who eat the least amount of animal products. Yeah. Teeny little bit. There's a few zones called the blue zones. Some of you may have heard the name blue zones. If you go to the blue zones, they do eat some animal products, but their total animal product consumption is about anywhere between 3 to 17%, depending on the society. 3 to 17%. We eat about 60% of our calories from animal products, and most of it is processed. The teeny little bit of vegetables that we eat are ketchup and French fries. And we also, from a children's point of view, we also live in a society where the official counting for funding public school lunch program funding comes from counting a slice of pizza as a vegetable. because it has more than 1/3 cup of tomato paste on it. So we allowed our policymakers to let this pass. No school in America, no public school in America serves whole milk. Only because fat is bad for you in whole milk, but it's okay to take processed coloring agent laden sugars to add to regular low-fat milk and give our children strawberry milk or chocolate milk. And the only way all of this is going to change is, like Gandhi said, we have to be the change that we want to bring to this world. Drop makes an ocean. This is not some agenda. This is not some, trying to sell books or products or gym memberships or DVDs. Okay, this is just selling health based on science. Yeah, and another thing that a lot of people are talking about these days, it's a big fad, the ketogenic diet. Stay away from it, please. The ketogenic diet. It had its, it's not new. It's not a new concept. It's been going on since I call it the first ketogenic diet is famine. Okay, the first described a dietary pattern that lowers or gets rid of your diabetes just like this. First described a paper was during French Revolution, where people in Paris did not have anything to eat for 10 days. They go back to the doctor. Doctor documents, you're no longer a diabetic. I swear, I'm true. I'm not joking, but this is actually historically the first recorded dietary therapy for diabetes is starvation. So ketone bodies, some of you who might have tried or who know family members, friends who are trying, we are checking our urinary ketones to say right? Ketones are formed when you're in starvation, right? So you want to starve yourself for 25 years on a daily basis, checking urine for ketones? It doesn't make any sense. It will definitely help you lose weight quickly, just like that. It'll get your blood sugars down just like that. Hasn't been a single study. That's what I ask people. Look, I am not dogmatic about anything. I'm not fixated in my ways. Just show me the evidence. I'll be the first one to change my mind. That's the beauty of science. Show me the evidence to the contrary that is reliable, that has long record, then we will change our mind. That's all we ask. Show me.
I just want to, you're very, I mean, everything you say is interesting. Yeah. So let me, so thank you very much, Dr. Reddy. Wonderful. So as Dr. Reddy said, the purpose of tonight was not to sell anything, but to get people to think, to get people to question, to get people to look at, what they're eating and how that affects their own personal health and well-being, their families, their friends, society, and looking at our relationship to the world and ethics and the whole thing. Having said that, I'd like now to open it up. We talked about a healthy body and healthy world, how about moving to a plant-based diet. So if there are any questions that anyone has in terms of anything the panelists have said tonight, or any questions you may have about your own process of changing the way you relate to food and what you eat, please feel free to ask a question. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank the speakers for a very interesting discussion coming from different backgrounds and eventually culminating to the same path. I think this is great to look at things from a global perspective. I'm a physician myself. I'm a pediatric urologist, and I thought that when I would grow up, I would become an adult urologist. But instead, I became a nutritionist.
Can everyone hear him? So why don't you...
I was saying that I'm a pediatric urologist, and I thought I would grow up to become an adult urologist, but instead I became a nutritionist. And I'm so thrilled at what I'm discovering and what I'm doing now, helping patients the way Dr. Reddy is doing it. at the Bridge Clinic and at the Judeo-Christian Clinic. But I want to ask a question, Dr. Reddy, which I think that is pertinent, because with all the stents that are being done, and that people think that they're doing it for their health and that they're going to prolong their life, could you let me know, Dr. Reddy, please, if actually stents prolong life or statins prolong life as opposed to a healthy plant-based diet?
Could everybody hear that question?
Yeah. One word answer is no. Stents have never been shown to prolong life. Never. So in terms of evidence, in almost all subspecialties of medicine or any branch of medicine, we are evidence-based. So based on evidence, we build up consensus, right? It's not my opinion. It should be reproducible, it should be consistent, it should be across the board, then it becomes level 1 evidence. So when we say something, what I'm doing this to a fellow human being in terms of a drug therapy or a device therapy, the level of evidence 1 or level of evidence A means that everybody agrees there is a lot of data, there is multiple trials and multiple meta-analysis where we put a whole bunch of trials and say this is it. If you don't do this, it's actually bad medicine, right? So the first human angioplasty was done in 1972 in Zurich. And from that day forward, if you look at the number of papers that were published on stenting, we can fill this entire room 10 times over. So that's how much evidence there is. Yet, there's not a single class 1 indication for it. The class 1 means that there's no strong agreed upon indication that stenting is beneficial. And this is not my personal opinion. This is the American College of Cardiology guidelines. There's not the only class 1 indication is that survivor of a sudden cardiac death, meaning that somebody collapses, they're dead, you put them on an ambulance, you shock them, you take them to the hospital, you do a heart cath, you find a blockage, and experts say, oh, we don't know what to do, stent it. That's about it. That's the only time. But 90% of the angioplasties that we do on a daily basis are people who are walking around with a little bit of chest discomfort. Angina, we call it. And the joke in the cath lab when I teach my students is that what I'm doing today for a living is what I call Botox of the coronaries. I'll make them look so damn good, you're gonna come back asking for more. True story, I do this on a daily basis. And I give I pulled Dr. Esselstyn recently, a patient of mine. We did it, same, nothing urgent, did not roll in through the emergency room with a heart attack, came in with ongoing little chest discomfort, very poorly controlled risk factors, very poor dietary and lifestyle habits. But given the stress test was abnormal, I agreed and we did a heart catheterization. Lo and behold, all 3 arteries have blockages. So the conventional treatment is you need to go for an open heart bypass operation. But you're stable. Your heart is not damaged yet. On the surface, the blood vessels are blocked up a little bit, but heart as a pump is still squeezing normal. All that you have is little chest discomfort when you walk up and down the block. Before you go for a bypass operation, why don't we talk about making some changes in your lifestyle and nutrition? The family was, oh wow, let's talk about this, let's talk about it. So I don't kind of beat around the bush about this. I said, I want you to go completely plant-based. The wife says to me, that's a bit extreme, isn't it? That was a golden opportunity for me to use Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. I paraphrased it, I said to him, I said to the whole family, cutting your chest open is extreme. Pick one. Right? It's amazing how, if you really look into the science of this, if you really look into, I don't know who said this, I think same person, I think it's S who said this, is coronary artery bypass operation is the radical mastectomy of the heart. And what he means by that is that there was a generation of surgeons, world-renowned surgeons, who pioneered the procedure. And the egos got in the way. and they would not let any other theme of mastectomy come into practice up until some young junior folks challenged it and said, this is wrong, and the entire paradigm changed. And the same thing with, if you really look at historically, how did we evolve with this lifestyle habits is very similar to what we went through smoking. Identical. And people who don't believe it, I ask them a simple question. Why at many hospitals, burgers, balloon angioplasties, and bypass operation are being done on the same floor? Right? Why are hospitals selling processed meats? Same thing, it's very similar to smoking, yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Is it a long question or a short question? All right, then I'll just repeat it. So the question is. So everybody hear that question? So the question is, a lifelong meat eater, how can one begin the transition to a plant-based diet? Does anybody?
One of the things that you could do, a very practical way that I found very useful with my patients is pick one meal a day. Just pick one meal a day and you be the judge. It's going to be very difficult for people to completely, it also depends on how you process information and how you see it. If you see it as a stress, it's going to be difficult. If you see it as, I'm going to have fun with it because I want to come off of a bunch of pills, whatever your reason is. Like, that's why I said, what's your reason to be healthy? So if your reason to be healthy is because I want to make this happen in 10 days, I seriously say 10 days because I have patients who came off of insulin on day number 9 after being on it for 16 years. And the guy looks me in the eye and he drives from Lakeland to look me in the eye and ask me one question. Where the heck were you? So the one practical way is pick one meal, learn about it. Breakfast, the healthiest breakfast that you can do. And then you will see the difference. It's just with one meal, you can see the difference in various components of your health. And then let that be the focus and let that be the source of building more and more and more gradually. And that's why I counsel and I kind of found it useful.
Yeah, and also, there are a lot of meat substitutes these days, so you can do a transition. There are a lot of plant-based products that now simulate the taste of meat, the shape of meat, burgers and dogs and things. You know what I mean? So you can get products these days that sort of give you the sense, but they're plant-based. So it's really wonderful. And
I just want to reply to that a little bit. You've heard of Meatless Mondays. It's kind of similar to what Dr. Reddy said, but you take one day a week, and all of your food is plant-based. And after you do that for a period of time, you can make 2 days a week. And I think what Fred just mentioned is true. Also, there's a lot of meat substitutes. There's like tofu crumbles, and it goes by different names. It's just like ground beef. So say that you eat spaghetti with meat sauce, substitute the tofu crumbles because it has the same texture, the same look, the same feel, and it's soy, so it just absorbs whatever flavor of whatever tomato sauce you put on it. So start substituting some of those foods perhaps, or veggie burgers. I love Gardein, which is a brand of products. I'm trying to think what else. There's lots of books and vegan books and websites with recipes. I don't know if this is a good time to make my plug for VegFest.
I just wanted to be sure we get to some of the other questions here.
These questions come up so frequently about how to do it, what is the process, how to learn, how to educate. So what I used to do, I used to literally take a piece of paper because I can't write all of that on my card. So I used to write a long list of books to read, websites to go to documentaries to watch. Then after doing it a few hundred times, I decided to actually create a website. It's again no sales. It's a free thing. It's open access. It's called foodmdonline.com. Foodmdonline.com. FoodMD, like food is your MD. Yeah, foodmdonline.com. You can go there. You can just look up, there's a resources link, what books to read, what Facebook groups to join, what YouTube channels to watch, what apps to download, all kinds of things, what podcasts to listen to, that kind of things.
And also grab some of the free literature in the back.
We've got some more.
Yes, over here.
I know that diabetes can be eradicated with a plant-based diet. Can we do the same? If someone has a blockage and you don't do the stent, can that be removed as well once the blockage is there?
Absolutely. So, yeah, the question was that diabetes, we know that can be, with good lifestyle, in majority of type 2 diabetics, it can be extremely well controlled or even potentially be reversed for the most part. Can the same be done with the blocked artery blockages? Right? I'll tell you a story about this. So Dr. Esselstyn, again, he's another legend. He conducted a study at Cleveland Clinic. They took about 190 patients with known blockages, meaning they did angiograms. It's not some kind of a rude estimate. They actually showed that these men have blockages and some women. But they were deemed inoperable. They said they are not candidates for any type of surgery or stenting. So he took them under a protocol that where he and his wife actually took them to their home. They taught them how to cook these meals. And they followed them for about 4 years. At the end of 4 years, the event rate of someone needing a stent procedure or someone having a heart attack was 0.6%. That's with nutrition. The best I can do with all of my pills is around 18%. But if I go and stent that patient with even 18% of events and a 33% chance that that patient will actually need a stent or a bypass operation. So while this study was going on, one cardiologist who actually works at the Cleveland Clinic showed up to the emergency room with ongoing chest pain. And he underwent an angiogram. He's a cardiologist himself. And they found the most important artery, the widowmaker, the left anterior descending. It looked like the moth ate the entire artery. It's like a blockages and plaque and ugly looking ulceration. But he chose to go on a completely plant-based diet. At 40 years, his angiogram was repeated. I can't find even a ditzel of blockage. I just can't detect it. If somebody showed it to me, it's as normal as it could be. So there is data. So when I say these things, there is actually published medical data to show the reversal of coronary disease. Speaking of which, that's the only data ever published that showed the reversal of coronary disease is with a whole food plant-based diet.
Yes.
My first question was the ethical part about how do you feed your dogs. But because I know we're short on time, if there's literature that will address that. And then the other thing that came up was soy. I used to eat a lot of tofu stuff, and then they were saying the soy and the hormones and all that. So I replaced it with cage-free eggs, right? So then, and what you said about the cholesterol, now I get that. But soy, all it is like contradiction after we can't get any straight information about whether that's bad.
So there are two questions. One is, what do you do for your animals? And do you have something?
Yeah. No, I don't have dogs. I have cats. Dogs actually can be vegan. I mean, truly. There is a woman who wrote a raw food, she's written several raw food cookbooks. Her name is Annie Phyo, Aniphyo. She's written wonderful raw cookbooks for people. She has a completely raw vegan dog who's very healthy. Dogs can be vegan. Cats, unfortunately, are carnivores. I am conflicted by that. I've never gone out and adopted cats, but they all show up at my doorstep. So I do have them, and they are carnivores, so I feed them meat. Although I'm waiting for the new developments where they're going to be using, I think, some cells from animals and creating meat in a petri dish and without any harm to animals. And so a lot of us who love animals are hoping for that day quickly. And if you think, and getting to your next question, if you think that cage-free eggs are better, they're not. I don't have a lot of time now, but the literature is back there. The animals are treated just as horribly. It's really a marketing ploy. It's not. I don't know if you saw recently, it was in the news, Direct Action Everywhere. It's a website where activists go out. There was a factory advertising cage-free eggs. They went in, all the chickens were in cages. I mean, people who say it's humane, they make more money because people spend more money for cage-free eggs, humane meat, organic milk, but it's just a marketing ploy. The animals are not helped at all. They're treated just as horribly, and I would just encourage you to adopt a vegan diet.
It comes up. Soy comes up all the time. So from an epidemiological data point of view, if you look at societies that have the least amount of breast cancer prevalence, right, are the societies that eat the most soy. Yeah, Southeast Asia and Japan. Now, because of globalization of a trend of Western eating, so if you look at the new trends as an interventional trial, meaning that these are the societies that are eating mostly plant-based with a lot of soy, and now you introduce them with cheeseburgers and French fries, you have a unique opportunity to see the change in their trends. They're skyrocketing. So that is the natural history observation. What actually happens at a basic cellular level? It's completely the opposite what the industry and the media has told us, which most of us, including doctors, when I believed soy was bad for you, it's not because I read a book on it, it's because I heard something on TV or I saw a meme on Facebook. Let's face it, right? I mean, come on. But because that was an area of not my interest, right? I'm not researching in soy. I'm not the guy who is doing soy procedures every day. So to me, but when you stop for a second and you actually go into the scientific literature, it is the complete opposite. Non-organic, organic, non-GMO soy, organic, non-GMO. Make sure that you get that. And the best way to do it is actually eat the soybean itself, which is edamame, that you can get shelled, frozen, organic, non-GMO. So there are two types of estrogen receptors in the human body. The biological estrogen that we all have, including men, it does its job by going through a receptor called the alpha receptor. That's what it does. We really don't know what the beta receptor is for from a process of evolution point of view. But when you eat soy products, the isoflavones or the phytoestrogens in the soy, they do something to the beta receptors. They completely modulate the beta receptors to downregulate the alpha receptors. And that's the reason why in people who eat soy, all estrogen-dependent tumors are significantly less prevalent. There is actually a study that looked at women who survived breast cancer after contemporary guideline-driven chemotherapy or what have you. And then they told them, a small group of people, go eat your standard way of eating and living. Other group was asked to eat two things, 50 grams of edamame a day and 50 grams of broccoli a day. At the end of 5 years, the people who ate edamame and broccoli had a 42% higher survival rate. So for the women in the room, if you really want to get into the science of this, because breast cancer is a big issue, and 2030, for the first time since World War I, 2030 is going to be the year where cancer is going to take over heart disease as the #1 cause of death. The last time heart disease was not a #1 cause of the death during the 1918 flu, the pandemic. So there's a book put out by Angelina Jolie's surgeon, Christy Funk, that's her name. Very interesting title. The name of the book is called Breast Owner's Manual. It's I haven't read the book, but I read some reviews. I'm giving because I know the gist of her message. I haven't read the book. I am aware that I'm advising the book without having read it, but it should be a good read. Yeah.
All right. Last question because it's 9 o'clock. Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of dabbling in this as support as a family member, but what was described to us from a cardiologist was if it comes from something with 2 or 4 legs, don't have it. So with a plant-based, not necessarily vegan, can I have shrimp and fish? Because I've read different things.
I think again, I think there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about tonight. I think where we're sort of ending up is with an openness to look at this issue, to look at what we eat, to begin to see it from ethical point of view, from the well-being of the planet, and from our personal health and longevity. Again, like the woman over here said, it's not about perfection, right? I think it's a begin to moving our life as quickly as we can, and that's very personal. So I don't think you need to get absolute about anything or put it on you. You know what I'm saying? I'd say experiment. I mean, I think what Isabel was saying. You begin with a day of it, or 2 days, or a week, and you experiment and you see how it is. I have children. They're older now, in their 30s. My son he says I'm a vegan at home, and when he goes out, it's he loves shrimp, and you know what I mean. So, I'm not going to shoot him, right? You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? So I don't think you need to be absolute. I think the important thing is for yourself, for your family, for the planet. We want to move in a direction. And I think at a certain point, as you educate yourself, and in my own experience, I realize that everybody agrees, you will feel better. You see, you'll feel better. And you'll have more energy. I mean, when I was looking at the quotes today for that list, Bill Clinton, one of the great health kings of the our ex-president Bill Clinton, he says, not only do I feel better, I have more energy. It's sort of like, and he's a vegan now. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mean, all these interesting people, and you'll feel better. You'll at a certain point, I think what the doctor is talking about is getting in touch with our bodies. And kind of really feeling how our bodies feel when we eat certain types of food and how it feels afterwards. And I think it'll be very obvious to us, the way to go. It'll build on each other. So let me just say thank you all for coming. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you.
So thank you all. Just a couple of announcements before we depart. Isabel?
I wanted to just make an announcement. Actually, before I make my announcement, I just wanted to suggest a website to everyone. It's called greatveganathletes.com. For anyone who thinks that you cannot survive and thrive on a plant-based diet, it's a very interesting website, greatveganathletes.com. It has bodybuilders with humongous biceps. It's got long-distance runners who run 100 miles and win, such as Scott Jurek, who come number 1 7 years consecutively. It's got alpine skiers. But check it out for people who think you can't get the nutrients you need from a plant-based diet. It gives the lie to that statement. And also, of course, I have to invite everyone to Tampa Bay Veg Fest. Tampa Bay Veg Fest, our 9th annual event, will be this November 3rd, which is a Saturday, from 10 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. It's in a downtown Tampa park called Perry Harvey Park. It's a new location because we have thousands of people attending and we needed a larger location. Actually, Dr. Reddy will be one of our guest speakers, so you can hear him more. Also, we will have Captain Paul Watson of Whale Wars and the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. If you're familiar with him, he'll be there. Our event was listed as one of 10 must-attend Veg Fests in the entire country. We also won the Jurors' Choice Award from Tampa's Urban Excellence Awards 2 years ago. So it's an award-winning festival. We have thousands of people who attend. It's free and open to the public. We have a children's area. We have live music, free food samples, cooking demonstrations, speakers that we bring in from all over the country. And also, of course, lots of restaurants selling vegan food and vegan products. So again, it's a free event. Come out, bring the whole family, spend the whole day. It's a wonderful event. And it shows you how easy it is to be vegan. It's so easy. One other thing I wanted to mention, we've actually had people come from out of state just to come to this event. I mean, they have written to us and said, I flew there from, I think one woman came from Illinois, and another came from Ohio, and one couple came from Canada. They said, we came to Tampa just to go to Veg Fest, and we posted those quotes on the website so you can see the testimonials. So it really is a fun event. It costs you nothing. Please come out and learn how easy it is to be vegan and to be more compassionate towards animals and better for your health. The animals suffer tremendously. I didn't really touch on that today, but it's really very easy to be vegan. I've been vegan for 12 years, vegetarian for many years before that. that. I've never looked back. I have no regrets, and I'll never go back. And I hope all of you can join me in being a vegan. And please come to VegFest. Thank you.
Thank you all for your wonderful enthusiasm and sharing your expertise this evening. Actually, Fred and I went to VegFest a number of years ago, and we were just wowed. The food was absolutely delicious. We learned a lot, and actually we've met some of our most wonderful members through VegFest, and a number of you have come here from there. So again, thank you all. This program has been put on, like a lot of our programs at FCM, free, really as a service to the community. We do subsist a lot on generosity. So if you are able to help us in any way, we have what we call a begging bowl by the back door. And anything that you might want to leave to help us just continue to support programs like this would be highly appreciated. And then finally, just one last request for members of FCM who are here, if some of you could stay and help us a little bit with the setup, that would be appreciated. So again, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you all for your attention and your questions, and have a good evening.